A Man of Contradictions, A Life of A. L. Rowse, by Richard Ollard. Copyright 1999 by Richard Ollard. This full-length reading was published by arrangement with Curtis Brown London and the author, and was produced in 2001 by Books on Tape Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. This book has 318 pages and is read by Geoffrey Howard. Should you have any questions about this recording, please call the customer service number shown on the package for information or assistance. Chapter 1. Contradictions. Cornwall, the little land, as A. L. Rowse, one of its most distinguished sons, thought of it, is like a tender towed in the wake of Britain. It is a tongue of land, 70 miles long and rarely more than 20 miles broad, buffeted to the north by the crashing seas of the Atlantic, indented to the south by the deep bays and estuaries of the Channel coast, sharing with Brittany a Celtic and a maritime inheritance that sets them apart from the great countries to which they have long been attached. Unlike the other large historic English counties, it exudes no evidence of wealth. There are no smiling, fat landscapes. Its beauties are either big, bare, dramatic, as most of its grand coastline or its central moors or hidden, intimate valleys. It is not at all English. A fierce poverty, a fierce independence are its human characteristics. Alfred Leslie Rowse, born on the 4th of December 1903 in the hamlet of Tregonesi, on the hillside above St. Austell in which it is now absorbed, proudly recalled that it, like all the china clay villages of the higher quarter, escaped the stifling embrace of the squirearchy. And that fact, I realize now, though it was never thought of then, had a profound effect on our upbringing and social outlook. We were an independent folk. We never saw anybody in the village better than ourselves. I never remember seeing any sign of servility among any of its inhabitants. We were not in the habit of saying "sir" to anybody. I cannot recall my father saying "sir" to anyone. Nor did the china clay workers as a whole, any more than, I suppose, the free and independent tinners from whom they sprang had done in their day. The tin mines, to which he alludes, and in which his grandfather had worked, had been for centuries, perhaps even from Phoenician times, the chief source of such natural wealth as the county could boast. The mining tradition it fostered enabled Cornishmen to seek their fortunes in the gold rushes in South Africa, Australia, and California when the tin diminished. It had finally given out a year or two after Rouse's death. But it was succeeded in the 19th century by the china clay industry, in which his father was employed, that still flourishes in the part of southern Cornwall in which he was born, lived, and died. Cornwall is now, to most English people, except those who go there for seaside holidays, again like Brittany, as remote as Greenland. It is on the way to nowhere. It is an end in itself, as Rowse would passionately have wished it to be, and as, for him, it always was. In The 7 Landscapes of Cornwall, he describes the contrasts and particularities of its landscape, concluding with his own. What about the corrugated lunar landscape of the St. Austell china clay country, in the moonlight, under snow? I once saw an aurora borealis up there on a snowy day, over 1,000 feet up. What indeed? But we must turn to the man himself, and there may be something to be said for introducing the reader to him by recalling how I was. At my very first meeting with him, more than 50 years ago, I recall a snatch of talk arising from the fact that Harold Lasky, then the self-appointed guru of the triumphant Labour Party, had attacked Rowse as a traitor to his class. What about him, old Nathan Lasky, respectable, prosperous pillar of Manchester capitalism? The words are not exact. I did not take them down at the time, and I certainly had no inkling that I should one day be Rouse's biographer. But the amused, high-spirited tone is as fresh in my mind as if it were yesterday. It has often been observed that actors who have made their name in comedy will generally succeed in tragedy, whereas the converse is rarely true. Which was Rowse. He certainly saw himself, or liked to present himself, as a tragic character, but his humorous perception was acute. He was very entertaining company, his sense of comedy irrepressible, if not often directed at himself. It was not that he was self-satisfied. He had a Pepsian power of turning a cold, objective gaze on the nakedness of his jealousies, resentments, pettinesses, that most of us are happy to ignore in ourselves. That he was unusually and variously gifted, few of his detractors, no inconsiderable body, would deny. The positive and negative aspects of these qualities are related. Rowse was a brilliant historian, specializing in the Tudor period, but by no means confining himself to it. He was a poet. He was an aesthete whose taste and knowledge in painting, architecture, and music were not shallow. He was a notable biographer. He was an antiquary whose understanding of the Cornish past was profound and passionate. He campaigned as a Labour candidate in the 1930s, when the tide was running strongly against his party. 40 and 50 years later, he was to encourage a view of himself as the sworn enemy of the progressive intellectual. And yet he could, and did, argue that he had been consistent in his loyalties. To the end of his life he retained his admiration for Attlee and Bevin. It was the fashionable left and its fashionable idols that he hated and despised, sentiments which were warmly reciprocated. Yet for all that, he never retracted his early admiration for Karl Marx, finding in his historical analysis a powerful support for his own skepticism towards liberal principles and professions. It was from Marx that he learned, and continued to believe, that at the base of human history lay its economic facts. Even those who did not find themselves berated as humbugs or derided as simpletons were disturbed by the diversity of his scholarly interests. Rowse never forgot that he was a poet, that he had won a scholarship to Christ Church in English, not history, and that he had appeared in print with Graham Greene and others in an undergraduate volume, Oxford Poetry, for which some of his contemporaries, later to achieve fame as writers, had been rejected. Like it or not, literature was as much his parish as history. The members of these two encrusted academic faculties, for the most part, did not like it at all. They liked it still less when he followed up a widely admired biography of Shakespeare with volumes on the sonnets and on the identity of the Dark Lady. Whatever the merits of Rowse's arguments, there can be no question that the tone in which he advanced them gave a huge advantage to his opponents. Rowse was quite clever enough to have seen this for himself. Why then did he adopt it? The answer that he gave was that a lifetime of rebuffs, of exclusion, of non-recognition, had exacerbated his proud and defiant nature. He knew, and he did not care. He had nothing to lose. He might as well enjoy annoying people who had annoyed him. How well or ill-founded this opinion was, the reader should be better able to decide when he has finished this book. But there can be no doubt as to the fervour with which it was held. Fervour, indeed, was the keynote of his personality. The mild distastes, the faint enjoyments, the neutralities that make up so much of everyday life were all but unknown to him. His response was always vigorous and vivid, though not necessarily lacking in subtlety or discrimination. Nonetheless, the speed and force of his perceptions, impressive, stimulating, provocative, denied him the insights incident to slow recognition, except in those departments of exact historical scholarship where minuteness and particularity are both essence and entirety. The long, hard slog through documents difficult to interpret or even to make out. What researcher is not familiar with the sense of inching one's way towards what is very likely empty of meaning or value? The tedium, the sense of pointlessness, the guilty and resentful awareness of wasting time are intensified by physical trivialities. The room is too cold or too airless, one's wrist aches or one's back is stiff, half-heard chatter annoys. To the cool temper these are trying. To the ardent, still more to the consciously superior, they are exasperating. Rowse was both. His ardour needs no demonstration. His consciousness of superiority took strong hold in childhood. Who can forget the little boy standing at the top of the stairs while his parents were still in bed, and proclaiming at the top of his voice, "Everyone's a fool in this house but me." The successful struggles, against what in his day were enormous odds, to win a first-class education, fortified this conviction. His election to a Fellowship of All Souls, a place where viceroys, archbishops, and other figures in the front rank of public life, as well as men of legendary learning, mixed on equal terms with young men who only a year before had been undergraduates, concluded the matter. Indeed, all souls came to take the place of religion, philosophy.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?